Okay, I want you to picture a moment. You know the one. It could be 10 years ago, it could have been last Tuesday. You meet someone new. Or maybe you stumble onto a new idea, a project, and suddenly there's this noise, this internal volume that just gets cranked up to 11. And it doesn't feel like an emotion. It feels like a fact. It feels like the universe just handed you the absolute truth.
It's that feeling of arrival, that sensation that says, okay, stop looking, you found it.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
it's undeniably real. It's electric. But today we're going to ruin that feeling for everyone.
Well, I wouldn't say ruin, maybe. Dissect it a little.
We are diving into a really fascinating and frankly kind of attacking essay called Mistaking Intensity for Truth.
Right.
It's by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha. And I have to say, reading this, I felt like Malha was spying on my diary from my early 20s.
It's uncomfortable, isn't it? Malha is essentially diagnosing this very specific glitch in the human operating system.
The glitch.
He's exploring how we confuse the loudness of an emotion with the accuracy of that emotion.
Right. We just assume that if a feeling is screaming at us, it must be telling us something important. But Malha's whole point is that intensity is actually a bit of a trickster. So, okay, let's get into the mechanics of this. How does this glitch even start?
Well, it begins with the arrival of the feeling. Malha points out that intensity has a very specific texture. It arrives fully formed.
Fully formed. That is such a good description. It's
Yeah.
it's instant. You don't work for it.
Exactly. And that immediacy is part of the trap because it doesn't ask to be examined. It feels more like a discovery. Malha makes this crucial distinction. In these moments, the emotion feels less like an internal state, something happening inside you, and more like an external fact you just found.
So just because it hits us with so much force, we assume it has to be true.
Precisely.
Right.
And this is the core mechanism the essay identifies. He calls it the quiet substitution.
The quiet substitution. I love that phrase. It sounds like something out of a Cold War spy movie.
It does, right?
But what exactly is being substituted here?
So think of it like a volume knob on a radio. Usually if a broadcast is loud and crystal clear, it means the signal's strong. It's reliable. Malha suggests our brains treat emotion the same way. We mistake the volume of the feeling, how much space it's taking up in our chest, for the truth of the signal.
Okay, so the brain just does a swap. It substitutes intensity for accuracy.
Yes, and it's quiet
Yeah.
because it happens before you even think about it. The mind doesn't sit down and go, wow, I am hyperventilating, therefore this person is my soulmate. That would be too easy to catch.
Right.
Instead, it just treats the power of the feeling as correctness without ever naming the shift. It completely bypasses your critical brain.
It's like we don't assume a siren is lying. If it's loud, we pay attention.
Exactly that. And evolutionarily, that makes sense, right? Loud noises usually mean danger or opportunity. But in the modern world of relationships, that short circuit it's dangerous.
Okay, so we've made the substitution. We believe the feeling is truth. What happens next? Because Malha talks about how this actually changes the way we see everything around us.
And this is where it gets really trippy. Once intensity is at the wheel, it literally reorganizes your perception. It narrows your focus. The essay explains that ordinary, everyday signals get recoded as evidence.
Recoded as evidence. Can you give me a concrete example of that? Because recoding sounds so technical, but I have a feeling the reality is pretty messy.
Oh, it is. Okay, let's do a scenario. Let's say you just met someone, the intensity is through the roof, and you text them, and they don't reply for like 6 hours.
The classic agony. We've all been there.
So in a normal, low-intensity state, what would you think?
I'd think, oh, they're at work, or they're busy, or they hate texting, something boring.
Right. Totally reasonable explanations. But under the influence of intensity with a capital I, that silence gets recoded. You don't see busy, you see meaning. You might tell yourself, they're not replying because they're overwhelmed by our connection. They're actually scared of how much they like me.
Oh, wow. I have 100% written that exact script. You turn a non-event into this huge plot point. Their silence is just proof of their depth.
Precisely. Malha says coincidences become destiny. And even worse, obstacles or red flags get completely twisted. So instead of seeing a problem as a contradiction, like, hey, maybe this isn't working, we see it as proof of importance. We think, if it's this hard, it must be because the stakes are so high.
That is so dangerous. That's like confirmation bias on steroids. You're basically gaslighting yourself into believing everything fits this perfect narrative you've built.
It is a narrative machine. And to be fair, Malha points out that this isn't self-deception in, like, a malicious sense. You're not lying to yourself on purpose. It's more of an interpretive confusion. Attention and truth often travel together, but intensity hacks that system. It commands your attention without offering any real coherence.
I do want to push back a little here, though, because not all intensity is a trick, is it? Sometimes that gut punch feeling is your intuition saying, hey, this is the right job, or this is the person. Are we just supposed to ignore our gut every time it gets loud?
That's the million-dollar question. And Mala actually creates a distinction, though it's a subtle one. Intuition is usually described as a quiet knowing. It's calm, it's alignment. This specific kind of intensity he's warning against is frantic. It's urgent, it's screaming.
Okay, so intuition sits in the chair and speaks calmly, but intensity is pacing around the room sweating.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Intensity screams because it's trying to compensate for a lack of actual evidence. It needs to be loud to convince you because the facts aren't there yet.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think we have to talk about where this shows up the most because, yeah, it can happen with a career move, but Malha really drills down into romance.
Oh, it's the most fertile ground for this kind of confusion. Absolutely.
Because you have that bodily charge mixed in, it's biological.
Correct. Mala writes the desire and attraction carry this massive bodily charge, but the confusion that follows is interpretive, not bodily. The emotional surge produces a story almost immediately.
That's the whole love at first sight script. You feel that spark, and instantly your brain is like, this must mean something. This must be pointing somewhere.
And not just somewhere. It feels like it's revealing a hidden truth. The more overwhelming the feeling, the more convincing the story is. We think, if a feeling is this loud, it can't be random.
But here's the tricky part. When you're in that state, you just stop asking questions. Why is that? Why do we shut down our skepticism right when we need it most?
Because in the face of that much intensity, doubt feels like a betrayal.
A betrayal of the other person.
No, a betrayal of the experience itself. A betrayal of your own aliveness. Malha argues that questioning the intensity feels like questioning your own capacity to feel anything at all. If you stop and ask, wait, is this real? Is this reciprocated? That voice just sounds like a killjoy.
That is so profound. So we silence the voice of reason because we don't want to kill the vibe. We don't want to admit that maybe this magical feeling is just a feeling.
And we reframe the doubt. This is where Mala drops one of the most cutting observations in the essay. He says, we don't just ignore red flags, we turn them into part of the romance. Misalignment becomes mystery. Emotional unavailability becomes intensity held in reserve.
Intensity held in reserve. Wow. That is the ultimate excuse for someone just not being that into you. Oh, he's not ignoring me. He's just containing his passion.
It's a sincere attempt to protect something that feels so vital. And this leads to what Mala calls the solo dialogue.
The solo dialogue. Oof, that sounds lonely.
It is. It's the slow realization that you've ended up in a dialogue with your own intensity, not with the other person. The experience feels relational, you feel deeply connected, but often you're just engaging with your own projected feelings.
Well, the other person is basically just a prop.
A prop for the intensity, yes. They might be ambiguous or barely there or totally different from who you think they are, but your internal narrative is just running a marathon.
So you're in a passionate relationship with a hologram you built yourself.
And reality can rarely compete with that.
That's slightly terrifying. But it explains so much about why we get so hurt in situations that, on paper, shouldn't matter that much.
Exactly. And this also links to the sense of urgency, right?
Yeah.
Mala talks about how intensity messes with our perception of time.
Oh, absolutely. It creates this massive sense of urgency. Time feels compressed. Waiting feels dangerous. The idea that the feeling might fade is a threat.
It's the we have to do this now feeling. Let's move in together after 3 weeks.
Or let's plan the wedding on the second date. We overcommit internally.
Overcommit internally,
Yeah.
yes. You've mentally introduced them to your parents before you even know their middle name. You assign these deep meanings to the connection before anything has actually been earned by shared experience. The imagined future starts to feel as real as the present.
And that just sets us up for the crash, because eventually reality has to check in. The intensity can't stay to 10 forever. The person reveals they are messy or unavailable or just normal.
And when it fades, or when reality finally contradicts the narrative so hard you can't ignore it, that's when you get what Mala calls an epistemic shock.
Epistemic shock. Okay, that sounds like a medical diagnosis. What does that actually feel like?
It feels like waking up in a house that you thought you owned, only to realize you've been squatting in an empty lot this whole time. It's not just heartbreak, it's a collapse of knowledge. It's the disorientation of realizing your entire map of reality was just wrong.
So it's not just, I'm sad this is over. It's more like, am I crazy? Was any of that real?
Exactly. If the feeling was treated as truth, then its disappearance feels like a betrayal by reality itself. You look back at your behavior, your certainty, and you think, who was that person?
It's the shame of the morning after, but for a whole relationship.
Yes. And Maha writes that we don't just grieve the person, we grieve the version of reality that opened up and then slammed shut. A whole world was imagined, and now that world is gone.
That is such a specific kind of grief. You're mourning a future that never actually happened, but it felt like it did.
But here is where Malha offers some compassion, which I think is really important. He notes that we judge ourselves so harshly for being naive. We feel stupid. But he clarifies. The intensity didn't deceive you out of malice. It overwhelmed you out of sheer force. The feeling was real. It mattered. It didn't carry the truth you thought it did.
That's a really important distinction. The feeling was real, but the conclusion was wrong. You weren't hallucinating the emotion, you just mislabeled the package.
You just mislabeled the package. That's a great way to put it. The mistake isn't in feeling it. The glitch is allowing the charge of the feeling to substitute for discernment.
So after the crash, what happens? Once we've gone through the shock and the shame, I assume we learn our lesson and become perfectly rational beings.
If only. Malha outlines two common reactions, and neither of them is particularly healthy. The first one is cynicism.
Right, the I'm never trusting my feelings again approach. Armor up.
You start treating every strong emotion as a warning sign. You become hyper-cautious. You refuse to let yourself feel anything that isn't double-checked by logic.
Which sounds completely miserable. What's the other reaction?
The second is chasing the rush. You become an intensity junkie. You get addicted to that initial hit of certainty. You bounce from one intense situation to the next because you prefer that temporary feeling of knowing over the slower, messier work of building a real connection.
So we either shut down completely or we become chaos demons.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
But Malha suggests there's a deeper issue here. And this is where the essay gets really interesting to me. He concludes that there is no final lesson.
Wait, really? Usually these deep dives end with, and here are the 3 easy steps to fix yourself.
Not this time. And I think that's the most honest part of the whole piece. He says the human emotional landscape operates through cycles of recognition and forgetting. We don't solve this. We will mistake intensity for truth again.
That feels almost tragic. If we know it's a trap, why do we keep falling for it?
Because the experience of intensity itself overwhelms what we previously learned. When that feeling hits you, fully formed, undeniable, loud, the joyous sound, it erases the memory of the last time you were wrong. It feels new. It feels unique every time. It feels like, okay, that last time was a mistake, but this is different.
So we're just destined to be the wily coyote of our own emotions, always running off the cliff because the roadrunner looks so shiny.
In a way, yeah. We are wired to hope. We want the internal feeling to match the external world. Mala says it's just a feature of being human.
So if we can't solve it and we can't stop it, what is the point of all this? Are we just helpless?
Well, he isn't arguing against intensity. He suggests a life without it would be barren. He's arguing for what he calls a quiet honesty.
What does that look like in practice?
It's the ability to admit, even if it's usually too late, that not everything that feels true is true in the way it first appears. It's about recognizing that intensity is just a loud internal state, not a map of external reality.
It's about feeling the feeling, but maybe not handing it the keys to the car immediately.
That's the perfect analogy. You can enjoy the ride, you can feel the surge, but you have to remember that the engine noise isn't the same thing as the GPS. Just because the engine is roaring doesn't mean you're actually heading north.
I think quiet honesty is going to be my new goal. That's such a useful tool. When I feel that overwhelming certainty, I need to pause and ask, am I seeing the truth or am I just feeling something loud?
And that pause is everything. The difficulty, as Malha notes, is that intensity resists that pause. It pushes for action. It wants to be solid. But if you can hold that space, you might save yourself from that eventual collapse of meaning.
But even if we can't save ourselves completely, it's comforting to know this is just part of the human condition. It's not that we're broken, it's that we're wired to be moved.
Exactly. The tragedy and the beauty is that our internal world and the external world they don't always align. And the pain comes from trying to force them to.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening, the next time you get hit by that lightning bolt?
It means we should try to practice that quiet honesty. When the world narrows down to one person or one idea and it feels like destiny, just remind yourself, this is loud, That doesn't mean it's accurate.
This is loud. That doesn't mean it's accurate. I'm putting that on a sticky note.
It's a good mantra. And also, be kind to yourself when you get it wrong. The shame of falling for it is so unnecessary. You felt something real. It just wasn't the truth you thought it was.
I think that's a great place to leave it. It's a call for self-compassion and a healthy dose of skepticism when things feel a little too perfect.
Indeed.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought, something to chew on. We've talked about how we cycle through this forgetting and remembering. Maha says honesty about our intensity usually arrives too late, only after the intensity has already done its work. So here's the question. If intensity is just this recurring cycle of forgetting, and the truth only ever arrives in the rearview mirror, are we destined to always be the last to know the truth about our own lives?
Malha seems to think so. We're the creators of the illusion, so it makes sense we'd be the last ones to see through it.
Terrifying. And also, pretty human. Thanks for the existential crisis, and thanks for the deep dive.
Thank you.